My sister announced her pregnancy like it was a victory lap. A family group chat, a blurry ultrasound photo, my mother's crying emojis, my father's finally, like our bloodline had been holding its breath for years. And everyone kept tagging me under it, like I was part of the miracle. Because in their version of the story, I was the plan. 6 months ago, my sister Claire, the one my parents raised like a trophy, looked me dead in the eye at a family dinner and said, "You're going to be my surrogate." Not asked, told, like she was assigning me a task on a to-do list. I remember my fork freezing halfway to my mouth, the smell of roasted chicken turning suddenly sour in my stomach, the way my mother's face lit up as if Claire had just announced a promotion, like my body was a resource the family could finally use. I said no, and Claire smiled like I'd said something cute. "Oh, come on," she laughed. "You're not using your uterus right now anyway." That sentence, so casual, so cruel, hit me harder than any insult she'd ever thrown at me growing up. I'm Hannah, 28, a software developer. I have my own apartment, my own paycheck, my own quiet routines that keep me sane. I'm not someone's spare parts. But the pressure didn't come like one big explosion. It came like drip torture. Daily calls, guilt-heavy voicemails, relatives I barely knew messaging me about how selfless I was for something I never agreed to. Claire even posted online about her amazing sister carrying her baby before I had signed, consented, or even spoken to a doctor. Then came the call that made my blood go cold. A number I didn't recognize. A woman's cheerful voice. "Hi, we received your surrogacy application and we're excited to move forward." My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Because I hadn't applied. Claire had. In my name. And that was only the beginning. Before everything fell apart, before words like fraud, police report, and surrogacy agency entered my vocabulary. There were just two sisters growing up under the same roof, and somehow living in completely different worlds. Claire is 4 years older than me. That gap mattered more than people realize. By the time I was learning how to ride a bike, she was already winning academic awards. By the time I discovered computers and taught myself basic coding, she was captain of the debate team, first chair violin, the kind of daughter teachers remembered years later. My parents, especially my mother, never said it out loud, but favoritism doesn't need language. It lives in actions. They never missed Claire's recitals, never missed a debate, never missed a chance to brag about her to relatives. When I asked if they could come watch me compete in a regional coding competition my junior year, my mom sighed and said, "Sweetheart, your sister has a concert that day." I stopped asking after that. I wasn't bad at school. I just wasn't Claire. I liked logic, quiet, screens, the feeling of building something invisible that worked because I understood it. I went into software development not because it impressed anyone, but because it felt like mine. Claire, meanwhile, followed the path everyone expected. She met Daniel, her boyfriend at the time, during college. Tall, calm, polite, in that emotionally distant way parents mistake for stability. They married right after graduation. My mother cried like it was a fairy tale ending. Everyone assumed babies would come next. They didn't. Years passed. Holidays came and went. Conversations grew awkward. Claire never talked openly about it, but I could tell the silence bothered her. Every baby shower invitation from friends felt like a quiet insult. While that was happening, my life was finally stabilizing. I landed a job at a tech startup, then another, then a promotion. I bought my own apartment at 27. Nothing fancy, but entirely paid for by me. No help, no applause, just quiet pride. My parents nodded when I told them. Claire smiled thinly. I thought adulthood might finally level the playing field. I was wrong. When Claire announced her pregnancy, I felt something I hadn't felt toward her in years. Genuine happiness. I thought, maybe this changes things. Maybe this is where we become sisters again. I didn't know she had already decided what role I'd play. Not as an aunt. As a vessel. Looking back, the signs didn't arrive like warning sirens. They came disguised as concern. As soon as Claire announced her pregnancy, the tone around me shifted. Conversations that used to skim the surface, work, weather, holiday plans, started circling one subject again and again. My body. At first it was subtle. My mother would ask how stressful my job was getting, whether my schedule was flexible, whether I'd thought about slowing down a bit before my 30s really kicked in. My father started making comments about how lucky I was to be healthy. Some women would give anything for that, he said once, like it was a moral obligation. Claire herself was oddly distant, yet intensely focused. She didn't ask how I felt about her pregnancy. She talked at me, not to me, about doctors, about hormones, about how surrogacy was so common now. I remember one phone call where she said casually, "I already know you'd do anything for family." Something about that sentence tightened my chest. We weren't close. We hadn't been for years. We spoke maybe once a month. Surface-level check-ins, birthday texts. No deep emotional bond that justified the assumption she was making. Then came the comments that crossed from uncomfortable into alarming. "You don't even want kids right now," she said once. "So what's the harm?" "You're young," she added. "Your body would bounce back." The way she said your body, like it was a shared asset, made my skin crawl. I tried to explain, carefully, calmly, that pregnancy wasn't just 9 months, that it would affect my health, my hormones, my career, that I'd just been promoted to lead developer on a major project, something I'd worked toward for years. She waved it off. "You're overthinking," she said. "Women do this all the time." Then she sighed and added, "I just didn't expect you to be this selfish." That word, selfish, lodged itself somewhere deep. It echoed in my head when my parents started calling daily, when relatives I barely spoke to suddenly praised my selflessness, when people talked about my womb like it was already promised. The air in my life grew heavy. Every interaction carried expectation. Every silence felt like judgment. "And Daniel?" He said almost nothing. Whenever I tried to loop him into the conversation, he deflected. "This is between you and Claire," he said. "I don't want to get in the middle." But that made no sense. If this was his child, why didn't he care who carried it? That question stayed with me, quiet, unanswered. And slowly, something inside me began to fracture. The night everything exploded didn't start with a fight. It started with candles. Claire had invited the whole family over for what she called a celebration dinner. She didn't ask me if I was free. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. She sent a message in the family group chat with a smiling emoji and the words, "Surrogacy celebration tonight, can't wait to talk plans." My stomach dropped when I read it. I remember standing in my apartment, phone in my hand, staring at that message while my heart started beating too fast. Plans, as if decisions had already been made, as if my body had already been signed away. Part of me wanted to stay home, to protect myself, but another part, the tired, long silence part of me, knew that if I didn't show up, the story would continue without me. So I went. Claire's dining room looked like a magazine spread. Soft lighting, matching plates, a small stack of pastel-colored baby books already placed at one end of the table. My mother hovered around her like a proud stage manager. The moment I walked in, my mom hugged me too tightly and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." For what, I wondered? For existing or for being compliant? Dinner started normally enough. Small talk, laughter that felt a little too loud. Then Claire leaned back in her chair, resting a hand on her stomach, not pregnant yet, but practicing the gesture, and said brightly, "So I talked to the clinic today." My fork scraped against the plate. She went on, describing hormone injections, timelines, how I would need to adjust my schedule soon, how exciting it was that things were finally moving. No one looked at me. They talked around me. Something inside my chest snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I stood up. The chair legs screeched against the floor, cutting through the room like glass shattering. Every conversation stopped. Every face turned toward me. My hands were shaking, but my voice didn't. "I need to say something," I said. Claire frowned. "Hannah, sit down." "I never agreed to this," I said, louder now. "I am not your surrogate. I never consented. You've been lying to everyone." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. Daniel stared at his plate like it might swallow him whole. Claire stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. "You're doing this now?" she cried. "In front of everyone?" "Yes," I said, "because you've already done it in front of everyone for me." She burst into tears instantly, real ones, practiced ones. I couldn't tell anymore. "This was our only chance," she sobbed, "and you're ruining it." My parents turned on me like a switch had flipped. "How could you embarrass your sister like this?" my mother yelled. "This is why no one can rely on you," my father added. "You've always been selfish." Daniel didn't say a word. Not one. I walked out with my ears ringing, my chest burning, my hands numb. As I drove home, one thought kept looping through my mind. If standing up for my own body makes me the villain, what does that say about this family? I didn't cry when I got home. That was the strangest part. I stood in my apartment, keys still in my hand, lights off, the city glowing faintly through the windows, and I felt hollow. like someone had scooped everything out of my chest and left nothing but echo. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of each other, so fast I didn't even read them at first. I knew what they would say. I'd heard those words my entire life. Selfish, dramatic. Why can't you just do this one thing? I sat on the edge of my couch and finally listened. My mother's voice was sharp with disbelief. I don't recognize you anymore, Hannah. I didn't raise you to be this heartless. My father's was colder. You've always had trouble thinking about anyone but yourself. This just proves it. Claire left 6 voicemails. The first was crying. The second was angry. By the 6th, her voice had gone eerily calm. You've always resented me, she said. This is just another way to punish me for being happy. I turned the phone off after that. For the first time since the dinner, the anger came, not explosive, not loud, but heavy and suffocating. It pressed down on me until my shoulders curled inward, until I felt small again. 13 years old, 16, 20. Always the one expected to adjust. Lying in bed that night, sleep refused to come. My body replayed the evening in fragments. The scrape of my chair, my mother's face twisting with disappointment, Daniel's silence. That silence hurt more than the shouting. Was I too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? Did I owe them a gentler refusal? Then another thought cut through the noise. Why is my no never enough? I tried to look at it from every angle. I examined my own motives like faulty code, searching for a bug. I didn't hate Claire. I didn't want to hurt her. I just didn't want to give up my body, my health, my career, my autonomy. That shouldn't require justification. The next day, I met Claire alone, hoping, stupidly, that without an audience, she might finally listen. She didn't. You've always been like this, she said, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You never show up when it matters. I showed up my entire childhood, I said quietly. You just never noticed. She laughed, not kindly. You're really making this about you? I realized then that she wasn't hearing my words. She was rewriting our history in real time, casting herself as the victim and me as the obstacle. When I left the cafe, my hands were trembling again. But this time, something else was there too. Clarity. Whatever this was, it wasn't about family. It was about control. And I was done surrendering it. After that conversation with Claire, something shifted, not in her, but in them. The pressure stopped pretending to be concern. It turned strategic. My parents stopped calling directly and started leaving voicemails instead. Long, carefully worded monologues about legacy, about how women make sacrifices, about how I would understand one day when I'm a mother. Every message felt rehearsed, coordinated. Extended family members I hadn't seen in years suddenly had opinions about my uterus. A cousin messaged me saying, I thought you were stronger than this. An aunt told me I was wasting a blessing. I stopped responding. At work, I tried to stay focused, but my concentration kept fracturing. I'd be halfway through debugging a system when my phone would buzz and my chest would tighten automatically, like my body had learned to brace for impact. That's when the real escalation happened. 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Hi, Hannah, a cheerful woman said. I'm calling from a surrogacy agency. We received your application and are excited to move forward. The room spun. I didn't apply, I said slowly. There was a pause, papers rustling. We have your signature, medical history, and consent forms on file. My hands went cold. Claire had done it. She had taken my personal information, forged my name, and submitted a surrogacy application for me, without my knowledge, without my consent, without my permission. This wasn't emotional manipulation anymore. This was a crime. When I confronted Claire, she didn't deny it. She screamed. She accused me of overreacting, of ruining everything, of being so determined to say no that I was destroying the family. My parents backed her instantly. You didn't have to take it this far, my father said, about me, after I told them I was considering filing a police report. That sentence broke something open inside me, because suddenly I saw the pattern clearly. When Claire crossed lines, it was desperation. When I defended myself, it was betrayal. I filed the report. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. The fallout was immediate and violent. Claire called me screaming. My mother sobbed into the phone about how I was tearing the family apart. Even Daniel, who had stayed silent for months, left me an angry voicemail accusing me of being cruel. But then, something unexpected happened. A mutual friend reached out quietly, carefully, and told me the truth about Daniel. He had undergone a vasectomy years before he ever met Claire. The reason they'd been trying for so long? They hadn't been. Everything. The pressure, the lies, the the urgency, collapsed into a single, terrifying question. If Daniel couldn't biologically have children, why was Claire so desperate to use my body? And why had everyone helped her do it? That night, I didn't sleep. Not the restless kind where you toss and turn, but the wide awake, staring at the ceiling kind, where every thought feels like it's scraping against bone. Daniel's secret kept looping in my head. A vasectomy, years ago. It reframed everything. The pressure, the urgency, the way Claire spoke about my body like it was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. The way Daniel stayed silent, distant, emotionally absent, as if he'd already checked out of the outcome. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Worse than that, I felt used. I sat on the floor of my living room with my back against the couch, knees pulled to my chest, the city lights flickering like a distant, uncaring audience. My phone lay face down beside me. I didn't want to hear another voicemail. I didn't want to read another message telling me who I was supposed to be. For the first time in my life, the question wasn't, why don't they understand me? It was, why have I kept trying to earn love that comes with conditions? Every memory from childhood started lining up differently. The competitions they skipped, the praise they rationed, the way Claire's needs always came first, wrapped in language about potential and promise. I realized something then that hurt more than any insult they'd thrown at me. If I had said yes, if I had given them my body, they would have called it family loyalty. But because I said no, they called it betrayal. That's when the grief hit. Not just grief for what was happening now, but grief for the family I thought I had. The one that would protect me, believe me, stand up for me. I didn't have that family. I had a family that protected the story they preferred. I cried then, quietly, my shoulders shaking, breath hitching in small, embarrassed sounds, like I was afraid even my grief would inconvenience someone. I felt alone in a way I'd never felt before. Not abandoned physically, abandoned emotionally. That was my lowest point. The moment where cutting ties felt easier than holding on. The moment where moving away, starting over in another city, another life, stopped sounding like running and started sounding like survival. And somewhere in that darkness, a thought surfaced, soft but steady. If no one is going to choose me, I might have to choose myself. That idea scared me, but it also felt like oxygen. I didn't plan to confront Daniel. It happened because I needed answers, and because carrying unanswered questions had started to feel heavier than the truth itself. We met at a small cafe near his office. Neutral ground, public enough to keep things civil. I arrived early, hands wrapped around a coffee I didn't need, watching people pass by the window like their lives weren't quietly unraveling. Daniel looked tired when he walked in, older than the last time I'd seen him, like someone who had been holding a breath for too long. I didn't ease into it. I know about the vasectomy, I said. He froze. For a second, I thought he might lie, but then his shoulders slumped and something in his face cracked open. Yes, he said quietly. I had it done years ago, before I met Claire. The rest spilled out slowly, hesitant, fragmented, but honest. He never wanted children. He told Claire that at the beginning. She said she was fine with it. She even agreed, but over time, she changed. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she just stopped pretending. She pushed. He resisted. They argued. Then she started talking about surrogacy. He went along with it because it seemed like a compromise, a way to give her what she wanted without reliving his own fears about parenthood. I didn't know she forged anything, he said. I swear, I thought you had agreed. I believed him, not because he was innocent, but because he was weak in a way I recognized. The kind of weakness that hides behind silence and lets other people take the heat. That meeting didn't fix anything, but it clarified everything. Claire hadn't been desperate because she was infertile. She was desperate because control was slipping. And when control slips, people reveal who they really are. A few weeks later, the legal consequences landed. Claire was charged with fraud, a misdemeanor, but enough to crack the facade she'd spent her whole life building. Daniel filed for divorce, quietly, without drama. He told me he couldn't live inside a marriage built on lies anymore. Then came the call that changed the entire narrative. My mother, crying, admitting things she'd never said out loud before. Claire had never been infertile, not once. She had been terrified of pregnancy since she was a teenager, after witnessing a traumatic childbirth involving a relative. My parents had known. They supported the surrogacy plan because they thought it would fix her fear. They never thought about me. And when Claire's plan collapsed, she panicked. She got pregnant by another man. Not Daniel. Not intentionally. Now she was facing the very thing she'd tried to avoid. For the first time, the truth stood naked in front of all of us. And I finally understood something with absolute clarity. This was never about motherhood. It was about entitlement. And I had survived saying no. The truth didn't explode. It collapsed things, quietly, thoroughly, like a structure that looked solid until you removed the lies holding it up. Claire's world unraveled in stages. First came the legal consequences. The fraud charge didn't destroy her life, but it stripped away the illusion that she was untouchable, the fine, the community service, the whispered conversations among relatives who had once defended her without question. Then came the divorce. Daniel didn't fight. He didn't beg. He didn't try to save face. He packed his things and left with a calm finality that said this decision had been forming for years. My parents were stunned. Not because of the lies, but because, for the first time, those lies were no longer useful. Extended family members who once flooded my inbox with guilt-heavy messages went quiet. Some avoided me. Some offered awkward apologies that sounded more like self-justification than remorse. And then there was Claire, pregnant, alone, afraid. The irony was brutal. She had spent months trying to force pregnancies onto someone else, and now she was carrying a child without the husband, without the plan, without the control she'd always relied on. My mother called me one night, her voice small in a way I'd never heard before. "We were wrong," she said. "We chose wrong." I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. I told her I needed space, real space. No guilt, no pressure, no rewriting history to make things easier. To my surprise, she respected that. For the first time in my life, my boundary held. I moved forward with the transfer at work. New city, new apartment, new routines. The distance wasn't punishment, it was protection. I didn't celebrate Claire's downfall. I simply stopped carrying it. And as her reputation fractured, mine didn't need repairing. Because I had nothing to apologize for. I walked away quietly. And that silence, my silence, was the loudest thing I'd ever done. 6 months later, my life looks nothing like it did back then. And for the first time, that doesn't scare me. I stayed in the new city, built a rhythm that belongs entirely to me, work that challenges me, friends who don't measure my worth by what I'm willing to sacrifice, even the beginnings of something romantic, slow, cautious, healthy. My parents and I talk now, carefully, honestly. They're trying. I see that. Claire had her baby, a little girl. From what I've been told, the pregnancy went smoothly. Motherhood has humbled her in ways nothing else ever could. She's in therapy now. So are my parents. We're civil, distant, real. And that's enough. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean access. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. And family does not get a lifetime pass to your body, your time, or your autonomy. For years, I thought strength meant enduring discomfort to keep the peace. I was wrong. Strength is saying no. Clearly, calmly, and without apology, when something costs you your self-respect. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Your body is not a family resource. Your boundaries are not cruelty. And choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. I didn't lose my family. I lost an illusion. And in its place, I gained something far more valuable. Myself.